Our family had a lovely vacation in Maine, and my wife picked up this beautiful calendar of artwork. It's one of those interchangeable different piece of art per month, and I wanted to build a frame for it that would contain all of the pieces of art and be easily interchangeable. So I had this piece of white oak lying around, and I finished it on that one side on the jointer, and then cut the width that I needed for all of the frame pieces on the table saw. And there's a clever stop block that has a 45-degree stop on it that I really like, and so I'm using that to cut all the frame pieces. There's the two short pieces, and there's the long pieces. And the chop saw has a factory setting for 45 for a bunch of different angles, and I'm just using the 45 setting. I tested it, and it's pretty darn accurate. So you can see there it looks pretty good as those pieces come together. But now I want to do the corner joinery in a certain way, and I actually have to build a jig for that. So these are the pieces of my old table saw station that I'm using to build the jig. And here I am countersinking. With that countersink bit, I like to do the countersink first, because I find if I drill the hole first and then countersink it after, the countersink bit rattles around in the hole and I don't get a smooth countersink. So in places where it's not like super accurate, or doesn't need to be super accurate, I do the countersink first. So you can see here I'm building a jig that fits over the fence of my table saw, and it's tall on the blade side, and it's just screwed together, and it's made to be loose enough that it slides back and forth on the table saw fence, but then you can clamp pieces perpendicular to the table itself and safely run them over the blade. So I'm cutting slots for splines in the corners, the mitered corners of the frame, and you just move the fence slightly left or right to widen the cut until you get it to the width that you want for the splines that you're going to install. Now I'm cutting the recesses on the back of the frame that are going to receive the wooden back of the frame itself, and then inside at another level all of the pieces of artwork. Doing the first cut on the table saw because it's the deepest, and I was afraid that if I tried to run the whole thing on the router table I might get some tear out, and I didn't want that. So there's that first cut, and then it's over to the router table. Shout out to John Heiss, another YouTube woodworker. This is completely his design, this router table, the lift of which is made entirely of wood. It's really a fascinating project. So we're setting up to do the second spline cut, and if you look at the front edge of these pieces, you'll see the kind of stair-step insets that this is making. Running all the pieces through to get the second inset. And then I changed to a chamfer bit, and I'm chamfering over both front edges of the frame and the back edge just to give it a nice shape. This is a trick that I love. So I've got to glue these miters together, and the way I'm going to do that is put some painter's tape on the surfaces of the outside of the miter, and then put a 45 block glued with super glue to each of those pieces of painter tape. CA glue is the super glue that gets used for woodworking. And what this clever little trick does is it gives you a through line that you can clamp to across the 45. See where the clamp goes there. And you can put just enough positive pressure on it that you squeeze the joint together, and you get a nice tight miter this way. I've seen this done before, and this is the first time I've tried it, and I'm really happy with the result. So I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to come back and take the clamps off, remove the wood blocks, and it sticks pretty good, as you can see. And then there's the result on the front of the frame. Now I'm going back with a different jig. This jig came with the table saw. The guy I bought it from said, yeah, you can have that. I'm not going to guarantee to you that it's square, but I've used it once before, I think, and it works fine. And so I'm cleaning up those slots for the splines. And I'm going to glue these spline pieces in. This is a another piece of hardwood that came, I think, from a cabinet that I took out. It might be hickory, not exactly sure. Then I'm going to use a toothbrush, an old toothbrush, and some water just to clean the extra wood off there. Now we got the little table saw sled there, cutting off the extra on these splines. And now this is the trick here. On the top edge of the frame, I'm going to glue the splines only on one side and then carefully shape them so that the top piece can slide in and out like that. That's the idea. Then a little bit of scraping to get the surfaces smooth and all my pencil marks off. I love using a cabinet scraper. Then I'm cutting the extra material off the spline on that top piece of the frame there. And take it over to the belt sander, smooth the edge off. And here's how that top piece fits in. Time to install the back. A little bit of glue and a couple of staples. I didn't have one piece of glue-on large enough, and I thought it'll be fine to have it done in two. A little more scraping. A little bit of sanding. You can see I put a couple of rows of painter's tape where those two pieces of the back come together so the artwork will slide in without getting caught on the lip between the two. Of course, I would have loved to have a large enough piece of glue on to do it all in one, but that's what I had, and I thought it through, and I thought, nobody's ever going to see that, so I'll just use two pieces and put a little tape in there. So that was the first coat of water-based polyurethane, a little bit of sanding with 220 in between. Here's the second coat going on now. I'm going to let that dry overnight. Dries quick, and then the surface ends up looking beautiful. Then I decided I needed a little bit of a recess in the top of the frame, so I put that scrap piece against it and drilled the hole. And here's the final product. Decided this is actually a 2026 calendar, but I'm going to put July in there anyway. Here's what it looks like. Drops right in, and the top of the frame goes on, and that's it. Thanks for watching.